When did you first become aware of the Indianapolis story, and how did you become aware of it?
Well, I think I became aware of it as a young kid. I grew up next door in a small town, and my next door neighbor was a survivor of the Arizona. And I would go down there every once in a while. His name, I got to call him Jimmy. That's all I remember is Jimmy. And I go down and sit on his back porch with him, and I'd want to know about the Navy as a kid because we had planes flying over us to a naval air station. And he would tell us a story, and he would talk about the Arizona and what had happened, and he was a survivor and all that stuff. And he jumped off the fantail when the ship was hit into the water, holding his hat. And then when he died, his widow gave me his hat. And so that made a profound, but he did mention the Indianapolis. He said, as bad as the Arizona was, there was the Indiana. And so I remembered that. And so fast forward, we start this model company, and we're building a lot of World War II ships and what have you. And I was aware of the Indianapolis story, of course. And then I got a call from a survivor, and then inviting me to their reunion. And I accepted. And at that reunion, these guys were just so hell-bent on clearing the name of their captain officially that I took a profound interest in it, largely because I think of the Arizona experience. And consequently, I said unequivocally, we are doing a model of the Indianapolis, and we'll help you any way we can to achieve your goal of clearing your captain's name.
So tell me, why was it important to build a model, and how do you think that might have been instrumental in ultimately clearing Captain McVeigh?
Well, first of all, because of the notoriety we have, we're seen as probably the finest ship model builder in the world today, and even then we were. I knew we get a lot of publicity, and that the model would enable us to tell the story and let the world know that these guys were trying to clear the captain's name, Captain McVeigh's name. So that was the reason for it. Then it kind of morphed into a situation where the more I found out about the Indianapolis and what occurred, the more I guess, bought into it, and then it became a passion for me that this guy's name's got to be cleared. I mean, he was railroaded. There was no question in my mind. So when we went about the process of finding and putting together all the materials to create this model, and it was about a 2-year process. So as we went on and we're getting this model built and done, the book In Harm's Way was about to be released, and we said we support him, the author, with having the model present at his book introduction. Of course, we did that. And I think it was right then and there, I took one of the original copies, if I'm not mistaken, and I said, well, I know what I'm going to do with this. And I figured I got nothing to lose. So who am I? I'm a nobody. And it wouldn't matter whether I signed a letter or not. So we just packaged up the model, and we sent it to President Bill Clinton at the White House in Washington, D.C., along with the book, with just a note. And it was just a card. And it was and then the base of the ship model that was sitting on was signed by the survivors. And the card just said, do the right thing. Big, bold letters. And so therefore, I guess I did that in that way because it wasn't about fine art models. It wasn't about me. It was about them. And this model was going to help them clear their captain's name. So if that model helped clear their captain's name, I'm the happiest guy on the face of the earth. I know it didn't do any harm. And it was probably the best possible use for that model at that time.
So you just packed up a $12,500 model, shipped it to the White House, and that's the last you saw of it, and you hope it helped. Wow.
And I don't, and to this day, I don't care about the money. I don't care what it costs. I don't care. It was because it's just money. What they were trying to accomplish was far greater than that. You know, that's nothing. I mean, how many guys died? 900 died. What's money? It's nothing. It's nothing.
Did you ever find out what happened once that showed up at the White House, or?
No. There was never acknowledgement or anything that they received it. Well, we know that.
Is it still in the White House as far as you know?
I have no way of knowing. No way of knowing.
Isn't that interesting?
But what's interesting is maybe it was just the terse note that was with it. It was not dear so-and-so. It was just do the right thing. That's all.
It must give you a little bit of gratitude to know you might have had some small part in that, right?
You know, I'd like to say that I have that feeling. It's, how do I put it? I don't think of it in terms of me. I'm nothing. I'm so happy for those guys. I mean, it has nothing to do with me. It has everything to do with those survivors and what they wanted to accomplish. I'm nothing.
What was your impression of meeting them and getting to know them?
It was like my neighbor sitting on the back porch talking to him. They knew I was genuinely interested, and because I was genuinely interested, they shared stories I'd never even told their families. Well, I found that out when my neighbor died. And his widow came to me and she said, you know more about what happened to Pearl Harbor than I ever did. He never told anyone anything. You're the only person he told this to. Well, you know, that's pretty powerful. And then when you suddenly feel the same thing from the survivors of the Arizona I met with, and then you feel the same thing from the survivors of the Indianapolis, I guess they understood, they felt that I really did care. And I'm grateful for that, because I really do care. I mean, I'm as angry today as I ever was. So
Angry about what?
as to what happened and why it happened and how it happened.
You're talking about McVeigh specifically.
Yes,
yeah.
exactly. Yep.
Are you still angry about it? Why?
I'm angry about this whole thing of bureaucracy and what happens within a bureaucracy and the things that are covered up and the lies that are told. And this was a classic example of that. And that's what makes me angry. I mean, when you figure that these guys were in the water for 4 days and they should never have been there at all, or if they were, they shouldn't have been there for 4 days, only because incompetence. And then the incompetence was covered up until years later when these secret documents, quote unquote, were released, and then you find out what really happened. So, yeah, he should never have been court-martialed, number one. The only officer of a ship, commander of a ship that was lost in World War II. He was the only one ever court-martialed, and he was court-martialed because people were covering up their incompetence. And that goes, of course, that's alive and well today, but it's nothing's changed, but it still makes you angry.
He technically was supposed to be zigzagging his vessel. I mean, is that just kind of a red herring? Was that kind of just an excuse to go after him?
That was the only thing they had, but then that wasn't even valid because it was at his discretion based on weather and where he was. He was in the straits, and he couldn't zigzag in the straits. It would serve no purpose. And the irony of the whole story was when, I think his name was Commander Hashimoto, testified at his court-martial, which I thought was incredible. He said it wouldn't have mattered what he did. He was a sitting duck. I mean, he you know, there's nothing he could have done. And then Nimitz, remits the guilty verdict. And of course, but he's living with this whole thing, and then he commits suicide in 1968. Well, the fact that he carried that with him as a captain of the ship, that's wrong. That's just absolutely wrong. It had nothing to do with him. It had to do with everything with the people that didn't even know he was there, and the 3 listening stations that ignored the distress signal, and all that was covered up until later on after the war. So that's what makes me angry.
Why do you think it was so important for the survivors you got to know to clear their captain's name?
It was a family. I mean, he was the head of the family. This was a family. You know, I mean, stop and think about where they've just been. They ended the war. I mean, they were This ship, the Indianapolis, was largely responsible for the end of World War II. It was carrying the components for the Fat Boy, which bombed Hiroshima. But little things like the ship went from its location, I think it was in San Francisco, to Pearl Harbor in 71 and 3/4 hours at an incredible speed. It's still, that record still holds today. Then it was unescorted from Pearl Harbor to Tinian, and they got there 3 days later. And of course, that was the beginning of the end of the war. That's pretty powerful stuff, and a nation should be grateful for these people that did that. And now, of course, the nation is, but to have the Navy cover it up, their incompetence, and sacrifice this captain and his family, if you will. I mean, they took it personally. It was not just the captain. It was a reflection on them, the family. So it's a family thing. And as I said earlier, I'm just happy that if we helped in some way, we helped. But it's all about them. It's nothing about fine art models or me, that's for sure.
We know the Indianapolis story as much as anything for the dramatic sinking and the fact that those poor guys were stuck in the water. But it has quite a storied history way before that. You touched on it, but it was there at Iwo Jima. It was there at Okinawa. It was actually Roosevelt's ship of state.
Incredible history.
Yeah, give us a few words on the history of this ship from the beginning.
Well, the beginning, it's an extremely long history, and the Iwo Jima thing rings the bell in a very major way, only because in this small town of Marine City, we just showed a documentary here at our theater called Iwo Jima Diary, and before you showed up this morning, the first Wednesday every morning, the old guys meet here, all the guys in the 90s, and we had about 12 of them here today. Coffee and donuts. We provide the coffee and donuts, and we meet, and they tell their stories. So I'm telling them about the Iwo Jima story and the diary that we're going to show, and this guy across the table goes, I was in the first wave. Everyone stopped and looked at him and said, what do you mean you were in the first wave? I was in the Navy. And his landing craft was it was like, shall we say, next door to the Indianapolis, because they were softening up the island for the landing. And he pointedly mentioned the Indianapolis to me several times. And in fact, he was here this morning, and we were talking about, and we had the model of the Indianapolis here, and he said, I can remember that, and here's what I remember. And he had a great story. So of course we did the documentary with him present, and he told his story for the first time to his family. No one had ever heard his story. And it's so if you could look at the history of the Indianapolis, it started out as a light cruiser, then became a heavy cruiser, and was commissioned, I think, on November 14th in 1931, if I'm not mistaken. And it was part of Roosevelt's entourage. It goes on and on. It's pages of what it did before it got to where it got.
I think it got 10 battle stars.
10 battle stars, yes.
Which is that's
incredible.
There aren't many ships that have that kind of distinction.
And damaged, sent back for repair, then come back into the action, and was very significant.
I think part of the reason it ended up getting the Little Boy mission is it was in San Francisco getting
repaired,
fixed after a kamikaze strike, right? So, this thing, it was in the action no matter what.
It was there.
It's kind of unfortunate, given all of that what we remember it for is for how it sunk. We remember it for 12 minutes when it had 13 wonderful and glorious years, right?
Yeah. And the thing too, though, the thing that bothers me is that it's an earshot. It's sunk, and then we hear about the sharks and this and that, but no one goes into depth as to what really did happen. There were guys in the water after the second or third day that were so delirious, some of them took their own life. The whole issue of the sharks and what that does to the psyche, the point being is that that the survivors that there were, I think 317 survivors, man, the fact that they could function for the rest of their life after that experience is an incredible tribute to them as men, you know. And I think that they've now found the Indianapolis, and that's great. But let's just tell the entire story of Indianapolis. That's what I want to see done. Let's tell the world what really happened, and it's far more than just the sinking of a ship. So that's what I hope gets told, for the sake of them, the crew.
You might have just given me my show closer, by the way. Thank you, by the way. I appreciate that. That was. Tell me, why do you think it's important for these guys? Why do you think it's important in general, but particularly for the survivors that remain, the few, the 19, to have found the wreckage? Why does that matter so much?
You know, that's a great question, because I don't have that answer. If you ask me, it's a peace of mind in knowing where it is. Do we have to film it? Probably not. Do we have to visit it? Probably not. But it's like a loved one, and that ship was family too, you see. That ship they were on was family. Knowing where it is, I think, probably is like a member of your family gone missing. Now they know where it is. I think there's a certain peace of mind associated with that. And I think that's probably the big reason for it.
And of course, it's a mass grave of about 400 men there, which is something that we should treat with great respect.
At least 400. I mean, 300 went down with the ship.
Right. Yeah.
And then, 700 more?
That's a good point. Yeah. I was thinking of the ones that went down with the ship.
Yeah,
but
300 went down with the ship.
So do you think we should sort of stay away from, I mean, do you have misgivings about showing it? Or do you think there's something ghoulish about it? Or what do you think? I mean...
You know, unfortunately, what they did to Titanic is disgusting.
Tell me.
Well, no one has the right to remove anything from a gravesite. Now, if it's just being filmed, I think that's fine. Perhaps it does serve a purpose. Locating is everything. Maybe the filming is the confirmation that they actually did find it. So maybe that's the verification process. Beyond that, we know it took a torpedo to the bow and blew the bow off. We know it took a torpedo to the starboard midships, sunk in 12 minutes. We know all that. So we know what the model or the ship looks like. I mean, it's right here. So I think the real purpose here is closure. It's the family now knows where it is, and I think you have to ask that of the survivor. My guess is, being around them, that's what he'll tell you. We know where our ship is now. The USS Indianapolis probably is the Titanic of the U.S. Navy, the greatest loss of life of any ship sinking in the history of the U.S. Navy. And so here we have this Titanic exhibit, RMS Titanic, floating around the world. And by the way, our model will never be used by them or any venue that hosted that exhibit. Here's our position. It's a gravesite. No one has the right to remove personal belongings from a gravesite. The glasses you found at Titanic were probably on someone. That's their personal belongings. You have no right to remove that from a gravesite. 1,100 people died there. Well, it's no different than Indianapolis. Such a tremendous loss of life. It's a gravesite, and that's fine. You've discovered the gravesite, but don't touch it. Don't touch it. I mean, and I think that's really important. So,
when you look at the Indianapolis story, it's just one of these stories that, but wait, there's more. There's all these things that keep happening. It's truly an extraordinary tale, isn't it? I mean, and you know, for example, when you talk about the actual sinking, there's so many things that happen in sequence. It's almost like a plane crash. If you pulled any one of those things out, it probably wouldn't have happened.
that's right.
What are your thoughts on the whether it was, you know, it seemed like a very lucky ship for a long time. Was it kind of a star-crossed ship or something? I don't know.
You know, I don't know. I think there's so much irony associated with this. You know, a ship that had done so much in its career and it was so important to the ending of the war on the one hand, and then to be shot out of the water in the middle of nowhere by a Japanese submarine. And then the irony that after the war, we've got the Japanese commander of that sub testimonying at this court-martial trial. You put all that together, and you couldn't write a script like that because it wouldn't be believable. It's just unbelievable.
The fact that they didn't have an escort, the fact that at the port they didn't report that it hadn't arrived, the fact that those distress signals were ignored, all these things are pretty extraordinary.
Well, it is. It's no different than Titanic. As the Irish will tell you, the ship was perfectly fine when it left Belfast. We gave it to the English, they sunk it. There was nothing wrong with the rivets or the steel or anything else. I mean, it was greed, arrogance, pride, incompetence, negligence. That sunk Titanic. I mean, now, why were those guys in the water for 4 days? Incompetence, negligence, all the same things that, oh, by the way, are alive and well today.
But not Captain McVeigh.
No, that man, as far as I'm concerned, how do I put it? He deserved recognition of the finest kind for what he accomplished. What he did was incredible, and he did it on his own. That ship had no escorts, no air cover. They just did it, and that's a statement. That's a statement.
Why don't you say a few words about what, describe the model behind us and what's involved in all that? Sure.
Well, in building a model, our position in building a model is that there can't be any errors. We have to have every plan and know the answer to every question before we ever lay out our plans to build it. And therefore, we jump through all sorts of hoops, pictures and the original plans and whatnot. And the Navy would cooperated with some of the plans, but not all of them. But then we found the plans in a shipyard, and we put it all together. And it took about 8 months just to pull all the materials together so we could even design the ship model to build it. And then once we had everything done, it took us about 7 months to build the model itself. So about a 2-year process. So 1997 to 99 is when we got it done, and then that's when we quote, no pun intended, launched the ship model.
And you say, how many of those are there?
There are 15 of these in the world.
Wow.
And when we announced the Indianapolis that we were building it, we do limited editions. They were sold out the day we announced it. So it's, and we will never build any more. Not even if we could, but we can't build models at this level anymore because craftsmanship is pretty much gone.
It's a sad statement. Yeah. Are you proud of it?
Yeah, I'm proud of what it represents. I mean, it's a great model. Don't get me wrong. It's a fantastic model. But I'm even prouder that we did it for what it represents. Yeah, that's huge for me. It kind of goes back to why I did the Arizona. Same thing. I did it for these guys. And that was important, still is. I mean, I'm sitting here with goosebumps telling you that because it's really what I mean.
Did you follow the search pretty closely? It's pretty impressive how they found it.
Yeah, well, I followed not only this one, but the Discovery Channel when they went looking for it. And and why? Why did I follow it? I guess I wanted them to find it. And when they found it, when they said they found it, I don't know, there was a sense of relief. Maybe I was feeling what the survivors felt. Maybe. You'll find that out when you talk to them. And I can't wait to see the answer to that. But I kind of think there's a certain relief.
Well, the term of art these days is closure, which I don't know if I understand closure, but I don't know. Would you go with that word, or does that mean anything to you?
Closure, if one of your family goes missing and you don't know where they are, then you find them, at least you have that closure of knowing where they are. And the ship was family. So it was metal, but it was family. It was their home. It's where the family lived. And so therefore, yeah, I think it's important. I think that's what the closure is. Not going to change anything, but at least they now know that we know where they are. How's that? We know where they are.
How are we going to identify you here? As the CEO of Fine Arts Models, what are you?
Yeah, someone having fun in life. How's that?